everyone, it's me, Aaron, Professor Thorgy, your guide to all things geeky, and this weekend we're going to be doing something different here on the channel. You see, this weekend is the Oscars, and if you are a longtime fan of this channel, then you know that we have a show called the Post Geek Out Reaction, where I just give you my open, honest thoughts about something that I just watched, and that does include full spoilers, and typically we talk about brand new films or brand new TV shows. However, last month, I did something called the Quest for Best, in which I looked back at some of the films that people called the best films of 2016. And someone who was a fan of this channel actually asked if I could bring that back for Oscar weekend to talk about some of the Oscar-nominated films. And I thought, you know what? I do that every year. Every single year, I go ahead and I watch all the films that get nominated for Best Picture anyways. Why not make a show out of it? Plus, it's easy, cheap content here on my channel, and I can always use ideas. So that's what we're going to be doing this weekend. All weekend long, I'm going to be doing post-geek out reactions to the films nominated for Best Picture. And just to clarify something, yes, I am going to try and cover every single film that got nominated for Best Picture. However, I will not be talking about Arrival or Hell or High Water, simply because I already talked about them when I did the original Quest for Best last month. And if you missed those episodes and you want to hear my thoughts on those films, then stay tuned to the end of this episode or the end of any of these Oscar edition Quest for Best episodes, because I will be putting a link to the original Quest for Best playlist at the end of every episode. That sounds like a really repetitive sentence. I think you guys follow that. You're all with me? Alright, cool. So we are going to be starting off this Quest for Best Oscar edition with Moonlight. However, this is a very serious film and doesn't feel appropriate to talk about surrounded by all these playful, childish things. So if you'll join me on the thinking couch, where I will be surrounded by completely different playful, childish things. Let's go! Considering that the last one of these I did was for Lego Batman, this will be something of a jarring shift because I assure you, Moonlight, nothing like Lego Batman. So this film, Moonlight, it was the first film that I saw in my lead up to the Oscars, and it's the last one I've really made up my mind on because, don't get me wrong, it's great, but it's one of those films that you kind of just have to sit with. Like, I didn't even really have like a big, strong opinion on it. I knew it was good, but it's one of those films that if you have a presentation to put on at film school and you just need a film that you can break down and diagnose everything that's being said in there, this is a film that you can choose. Because this is a film with so many different layers to it, even just in the way that the story is structured. Let me go ahead and explain to you guys the story. It's the story of this little boy named Sharon. At least he's a little boy in the beginning. This whole movie tells his entire life over the course of 3 different points in his life. I'm getting repetitive already, that's not a good sign. But it starts off with him as a little boy. Then later on it shows him as a teenager in high school. Then later on it shows him as an adult. And basically this whole movie is just showing like how hard it is to grow up being gay. Because there were so many times during this movie, especially when I was seeing him as a high schooler, I went, man, being a kid sucks. However, I'm a straight white guy. This character here is a gay black kid. And I was like, life sucked for me growing up. I can't even compare to what this kid must be going through. This movie does an amazing job of putting you in the shoes of a completely different person because you are with this kid at every point in his life, especially when he's a teenager, but I'll get to that in just a second. As I said, this film starts off with him as a small boy, and one day he is hiding from some other kids. I am very tired right now. I'm very sorry. Take 2. Okay, this film starts off with him as a little boy, and he is hiding from some other kids, and he is discovered by this man, played by Mahershala Ali. I am very sorry if I mispronounced that. For anybody out there who saw the Luke Cage series, he played Cottonmouth, and he basically just takes this kid and he's like, listen, I'm gonna get you home, where do you live? But the kid won't talk. So he's like, well, I can't just leave you here. So he takes him back to his home and he meets his wife, and they're both just very understanding. They're very nice, very friendly to this kid until eventually he's able to open up to them. And when he takes Sharon back, you meet his mother, and it's very clear he did not want to go home. And you don't know why just yet, because when you first see his mother, his mother's acting like a mom. His mother is like, where were you? Why didn't you come home? Who's this man? You know, she's doing all the stuff that a mother should do in a situation like that. However, as I said, it's very clear to the audience something isn't right. And as the story goes along, you find out that his mom is a drug addict, and that's just when he is a little kid. From there, it moves on to when he's a teenager, and now his mom is just hopeless. Like, I don't like using the term hopeless, but it's the best way to describe her situation at that point in his life, because she just, I kept asking myself, like, what does she do all day? Because she is just like sprawled out on the couch. She just can barely move. He can't even stay there at night because he knows that she's going to bring some other drug addicts over there to their house. He's still going back and staying at the house of the wife of the man who kind of saved him when he was a kid. And that man has passed away, but his wife is still like, hey, listen, I practically raised you. You're always welcome in this house. But then, like, when he goes back to his mom's house in the morning, she has basically locked herself out of the house and she needs to get in and get money. And she is like, she just doesn't even care about her son. She pretends to care about her son just so that he'll let her into the house. And that's one of the saddest scenes in this whole movie. Because, like, as I said, you, the audience member, you know what's up. You can tell just in her performance, she doesn't care when she's asking, like, where was he? What's he been up to? She doesn't care. She just wants to use him to get inside the house to get money. It is so heartbreaking watching this kid grow up, and I haven't even covered him going to school yet. But as a teenager, you see him go to school, and yet he is just getting picked on by everyone. He has like one friend. He has this one friend, Kevin, who is going to be very important to this story. But so many, he is just getting crap from every single angle at this school. And there comes a moment in which him and Kevin are in the hallway, and Kevin is just bragging about having sex with this woman in the stairwell. And it's just so sad because you know that Sharon is gay. And Sharon knows that Sharon is gay. But, man, watching him have to hide that and have to be like, oh, yeah, okay, like, you know it is paining him. It hurts so much. But then one night he's out there at the beach just staring off at the ocean, and then Kevin comes in and the two of them actually kind of like really talk. And like Sharon kind of opens up and it's just like, dude, I want to break down at all moments. I am just a wreck. And then there comes this moment in which him and Kevin are sitting there, and Kevin just gives like this little lean in, just like just a centimeter of movement, just like that. And like I started cheering them on like they were the Falcons at the Super Bowl. Like, you remember when that guy at the Super Bowl caught that pass and ran the entire field down? Like, every inch that he was moving in, I was just cheering like, oh, thank God they're going to find each other. Like, I didn't even think that Kevin was gay in this film. But like, when it gets to that point, I was like, oh my God, thank God. He's not alone. That was what I was cheering on, is I was like, he finally has some kind of an outlet, because you know this kid had been living with this his entire life, and it can't be easy growing up gay no matter where you are, but he is growing up in a poor neighborhood where everyone is just ready to kick his ass for any reason. And I was like, God, this poor kid has had nothing in his life. And in like that moment, I was like, finally, he has something there. But then it gets to what is the most heartbreaking moment in this entire film. And it's when this kid who has been bullying Sharon goes up to Kevin and is like, man, yeah, we grew up together. You remember what that was like? Oh man, remember the pizza that they served at lunch? Like, it was just so weird to watch these two characters bonding over pizza from their childhood. But like, I did that with people who I knew from elementary school when I got to high school. So that was another thing that I got pointed out about this film. You guys have to forgive me if I'm all over the place, but this is the post-geek out reaction. You guys know how I do this. I go all over the place. But that was one of the things I have to applaud. This film has some of the most realistic dialogue and realistic moments I've seen. Like, the high schoolers in here talk like high schoolers. Like, they don't say things that are particularly clever. They don't say things that are particularly well written. They say things you hear high schoolers say. And not like stuff that's like an adult would hear a high schooler say and go, I'm going to write that down. It's like, no, when the kids are picking on Kevin, I was like, that's what it's like to get picked on in high school. Not like TV versions of getting picked on in high school where it's like, oh yeah, you're lame. Like, they are saying stuff that is just heartbreaking, stuff that is just going to crush you and weigh you down. And I'm like, that's what bullies were like in high school. This film feels real. But going back to the thing I was talking about just a moment ago about the pizza, the important stuff in this film. So the bully says to Kevin, hey, you remember that game we used to play? Get down, stay down? Where I would just pick someone out of the crowd and you would just wail on them until they didn't get back up, which, again, very realistic that they're going, that was a game. That's not a game, that's just beating people up. However, that's what bullies are like in high school. That's what bullies are like in all schools. And which is like, yeah, us beating people up is a game. It's like, that's how they think. So, again, that was amazing to see a film just capture that so well. But yeah, he goes, yeah, you remember that game where you basically just beat the crap out of whoever I told you to? And Kevin was like, yeah. And he's like, you still good to do that? And Kevin was like, yeah, hey man, I ain't a chicken. Of course, I can totally do that. And that plays into what the theme of this entire film is, and I'll fully sum that up at the end of this whole description of the story. But man, as I said, this is just one of those films that when you realize what this is a story about and you look back at it, it's like, man, this entire film is about that. So that's a little teaser for when I sum all this up in a couple minutes. But this is the most heartbreaking scene in the whole movie. They go out right after school, and the bully just points at Chiron and goes, yo man, lay this guy out. And Kevin, the only friend he has in the world, just starts beating the crap out of him. And Chiron doesn't want to stay down. He decides to keep picking himself back up until he is just beaten, until he is bloody and bruised. And one of the things I love about this is that this went on for a while before a teacher ran in. And it's like, again, that's kind of what it was like at my school. Like, the teachers never wanted to do anything. They were really hoping we would just resolve it ourselves because that's what children do. So, yeah, again, just capturing everything so realistically. But that was a heartbreaking scene. The one thing this guy had going for him, the one friend he had, the one person out there who he could kind of connect with for being gay, just beat the crap out of him just because he wanted to impress this other random guy. That was it. Just because he didn't want to look like a coward. And it's not like Kevin just turned evil. In that moment, you can see how pained he is having to attack his friend. But he's like, I can't go against this guy. I can't make myself look bad. I can't make myself look like a coward. And man, there's a moment after that in which he is in the principal's office. And the principal is saying, if you don't press charges, they're just going to do this again. And she calls him boy, or son. I can't remember exactly what, but he just goes, don't call me that. And she goes, well, you're not a man. If you were a man, there'd be 3 other kids in here with you. And I was like, again, realistic, because I remember getting into fights back in school in which the teachers would be like, yeah, you ain't nothing. Like, that would be like their response. They'd be like, yeah, how come you didn't fight back? And I was like, because words fail me at the moment. Like, that was the kind of stuff that you would see in an actual school. So the moment in which this teacher was just like, yeah, if you were a man, you would have fought back. It was like, God, not the lesson the teacher should be teaching right now. That is BS. So then it cuts to a scene, and this is one of the biggest things that I have to applaud this film for. When they wanted you to feel an emotion in a scene, they made you feel it. The score was always on point, and the director could adapt to whatever the scene required. And the next scene after this is Chiron burying his face into the sink, filled up with ice. The lights are flickering, the music is roaring, and it turns into a super villain origin story at that moment, because you can tell that's the moment he broke. And so Chiron just goes back to school the next day, And there is a weird little thing that, like I said, just pointing out like how crappy it is to be a kid. He goes back into the school, and like very quickly as the camera like follows him, you see like a small amount of blood on the wall. And I was like, I kept looking at it like, is that paint? It's like, no, that nobody could paint that. That is clearly from someone just smashing against the wall. Like, holy cow. That's how bad of a place this kid is living. He just walks right over to the bully who told Kevin to attack him, picks up the chair, and breaks it on his back. And one of the things, like I said, that I love about this film, realistic. That kid goes down. This is not one of those like, oh, you break a chair over someone, they get back up, and it's an all-out brawl. No, you hit someone with a chair, they're not getting back up. And yeah, they made you feel like, oh my god, he's lost it. This is it. This is the moment which he finally snapped. And his high school years end with him being loaded into a police car. Then it cuts to the third part of this film. It's him as an adult. And when it first popped to him as an adult, he was like smooth. He had like a gold grill on his teeth. He was driving this big fancy car. He was jacked. He had been working out. And like also like the way that he was talking to people, like Sharon as a kid and as a high schooler is always like this, like, you know, like you could tell like this is a kid who just had the weight of the world on him at all times. It was just crushing him, and he could barely even talk. Now you see him talking to people, and he's actually like joking around and stuff. Like I looked at it, and one of my small complaints was like, man, I can't look at him as an adult and be like, yeah, you know, I believe that's the same guy. I didn't get that at all. Turns out he's selling drugs now because he met someone in prison, in juvie, who like hooked him up when he got out, and that's just the path that he got set down. So there's a lot of statements that you can make about that, about like, you know, the prison system and how it kind of just encourages more crime when it gets out. But that's like a whole political statement for another day. You guys don't turn to this for like political stuff, but yeah, basically when he got out, that was his only option, is to hook up with a guy he met in prison and start selling drugs. And it was, again, heartbreaking to see that that was the path he was now going down. This little kid who we'd been following, just everything was constantly against him. However, as I said, I couldn't really buy that this was the same kid that I saw previously in this film. But then he gets a phone call, and it's Kevin, who he has not spoken to in years. The moment he gets that call from Kevin, he just goes back to like, hey, so yeah, hey, yeah, you know, just being just completely like crushed all over again, like barely able to move. So yeah, that was amazing. Like the moment that he started talking to Kevin, I saw this big muscular dude turn into that little tiny skinny kid all over again. It was an amazing performance. But Kevin's like, hey man, yeah, listen, I did some time myself. I got out. I got a kid now. My wife and I were separated, but we're still cool. We're still cool for the kid. But I got a job now as a cook at this little diner. And you know what? I decided, you know what? I'm in the area again. Just out of nowhere, I heard this song on the radio. How about you come over, I'll cook you something. He comes over to the diner, and Kevin has got his life together now. Kevin is doing just fine. It is good to see what is happening to Kevin, but when he learns what's happening to Chiron, he's just like, dude, this ain't you. Like the teeth, this whole, you know, the car, what you're doing for a living now, this is not you. And when he finds out that Chiron started selling drugs because of someone he met while he was in juvie, it was like, you could see it in Kevin's eyes, like, this is partly my fault. Because you would not have done that if I had just told that kid no. Like, you can just see it. That he's like, this is partly on me. But then at the same time, he kind of turns it around on him, and it's just like, this ain't you. And one of my small complaints with this film is that I didn't really get the feeling for who Chiron was, other than just a kid constantly being beaten down. But then I realized that's actually a positive for this film. Like I kept hoping, it's like, show us like you have some kind of a hobby, something that you want to pursue, but you can't because of all this stuff. But then I realized the fact that he doesn't even have that speaks to how much he is just being beaten down by life. This kid doesn't even have goals. He doesn't even have a hobby. He doesn't even have dreams. That's how much he's been beaten down. And basically, Kevin and Sharon just spend the rest of the movie talking about what's happened, and then finally kind of comes back to Sharon finally admits that night they're on the beach. No one's ever done that before, and no one has done it since. And basically he's like, that's the moment in which he kind of admits, man, I've never been allowed to be me. And then the film just ends with Kevin and Sharon, and they're just kind of holding each other. And you get that feeling, it's like, you know what, it's not like that magically fixed Sharon. It's not like, oh my god, hooray, he's going to go on and things are going to be perfect now forever. But it was like, finally, you got to be you. It took this entire life, but you finally got to be you. That's the victory of this film, is that we watch this man who could never be himself finally get to be himself, and that's what this entire movie is about. Because you see, when he was a kid, everyone called him Little. Nobody called him Sharon. And there is a moment in which he is at the beach with Juan, who's the character that was played by Mahershala Ali. Again, sorry if I'm mispronouncing that. But he's teaching him how to swim, and then as they're sitting there on the beach, he says that when he was a kid, he was running around the beach, and this woman said that, and this woman yelled out to him and said, little black boys soak up the moonlight. And when a little black boy soak up the moonlight, they're not black, they're blue. And she said, I'm going to call you Blue. And so then little Sharon says, is that what people call you? And goes, no, people don't call me Blue because you can't let other people decide who you are. You have to be yourself. And that's what this entire film is all about. It's about being yourself. And as I said, this entire film, we have seen this kid, and he knows who he is, but he is afraid to actually admit that. He's afraid to actually be that person. And one of the great ways that they are able to tell that story is that he constantly has nicknames all throughout his life. When he's a kid, everyone calls him Little. When he is in high school, people call him Sharon, but his best friend Kevin calls him Black. And then as an adult, when he's a drug dealer, everyone calls him Black. That's the nickname that everyone calls him by. And as I said, going back to that scene at the beginning, in which he said, listen, you can't let people give you these names. You can't let people tell you who you are. You have to be yourself. All those nicknames are just metaphors for him not being allowed to be himself. I think that's a great way that they decided to tell this story. And at the end of this film, right after it just shows him and Kevin embracing each other, it then cuts back to him as a little kid standing there on the beach, and the moonlight makes him actually look blue. And that to me was kind of like, I will admit, it took me a little while to figure out what that final scene was supposed to mean, and then it finally kind of hit me, going back to how he said that the old woman yelled at him, little black boys turn blue in the moonlight. I was like, his nickname as an adult is Black. So the fact that we see him blue in the moonlight kind of shows this was his transformation. This was the moment in which he went, this is who I am. I'm not the character of Black that I've been playing for my entire adult life. I can finally be me. I finally now, after all this time, found another person that I'm allowed to be me with. And when I finally realized what that scene was supposed to mean, it was incredibly touching, but also just going back and thinking about this entire film, that is kind of the message for all of these characters. We're following Sharon, but we see every single one of these characters at every single stage in their life. We see his mom when he is a little kid and when he's a teenager, and yeah, she's a drug addict and she is just destroyed. But as an adult, she's kind of gotten clean. She's kind of gotten her life together, and she's actually helping other people to get clean. She's helping other people go through therapy for this stuff. And I was like, that's her finally finding herself. That is her taking this substance that was controlling her and telling her who to be. She's now gotten rid of it, and she has become herself. But also looking at Kevin. Kevin, man, it didn't even hit me really until I was like summing up this film. Like, wow, he had that journey too, because we saw him in high school, and he is friends with Sharon. He doesn't want to beat up Sharon, and he himself is gay. He doesn't want to go around and discriminate against Sharon for the way that he is. But not only can he not tell people that he's gay as well, but also when that kid comes up to him and says, I want you to beat up Sharon, he does it just because he cares about what other people think about himself. He is willing to beat up one of the only friends that he has just so other people won't call him a coward, just so that other people won't call him chicken, just so that other people will think he's cool. That is him letting other people decide who he should be. So this is a film that carries that message all throughout, and I think it does it beautifully. I really did enjoy this film. It was very heart-touching, but it's not one of those films where after you watch it, you're like, yes, oh my gosh, yes. You're not standing up. You're not looking to high-five anybody. Like I said, it took me a couple of days to think about this. It was one of those films where I just kind of had to sit there and it was like, yes, that was a good moment, wasn't it? Like, at no point did I really get amped up. At no point was I like, I gotta go out there and tell someone about this film right now. It's one of those films that you wouldn't high-five, but when you see it across the street, living its own life, you're like, way to go. Good for you. You did a good job. When you see it walking around with the Oscar that it probably will have this weekend, you're like, you earned that. Good for you. So yeah, it's a thinker. It's one of those films that you're gonna have to like just kind of like sit there with. But that's the thing. It's good to have a film like that every now and again. So if you guys saw Moonlight, let me know in the comments down below what you thought about. Sorry if I was being a little bit quiet throughout all this. I'm recording this super late. Didn't want to wake up any neighbors. But for the rest of these episodes, I should be talking at my normal volume. So if you want to see the rest of these Oscar post-geek out reactions, make sure you click that subscribe button. And if you want to see some of the other good movies that we have reviewed, make sure that you click on that Quest for Best playlist that we have coming up in just a few seconds. But thank you guys for joining me, and come back next time. Bye.